Hey, thanks for joining me on Guitar Discoveries. Today it's part 3 of Funky Favorites and Studio Stories featuring my guest, Andrew Bush. Andrew has had his studio in Echo Park, part of Los Angeles near downtown, for over 26 years. He recently moved to Chatsworth into a really beautiful studio facility. And you can see from these photos how gorgeous it is. It's a great tracking room, and Andrew is a master of capturing the authentic sound, whether it's hi-fi or lo-fi. He'll capture it, and he'll do it in an amazing way. One of the cool things about Andrew is that he doesn't shy away from really interesting instruments when he's producing and engineering. So today he's going to be featuring a really cool one. We're going to dive in, and we'll even let you hear an album track that this song was featured very prominently on. So stick around. It's time for Funky Favorites and Studio Stories Part 3.
So this guy, this is a baritone ukulele, and I really love this thing. This is another one where I know it's not tuned how you're supposed to tune it.
Yeah, so this morning you had it tuned, what was it, like a DDGG kind of thing, or just fifths, or what was it?
It was DAD.
Oh, okay.
But then I had the top 2 strings on the same note. That was left in the tuning of the last time I recorded it.
Okay.
But then afterwards I said, you know what may be kind of fun is that. So D-A-D-E, and that gives you some interesting options between these guys.
Yeah, so you're in it's a sus2 sitting there, just wide open.
So I did a record with my buddy Matthew. It took us a few years. Had a few detours. And this guy figured pretty prominently. I think it was on at least 2 or 3 tunes on the record, but on one tune, it's just this and voice. Isaac the Knife is the name. And it's a very simple, I think it's just...
Abraham, Sarah, Ishmael, and me. We all came out to Hollywood to be on TV. We did the talk shows, we did the town, we did each other at the burial ground. Who's gonna tell them the terrible news? Who's gonna point out the obvious clues? Tossing that bottle over my shoulder. Who's gonna teach me how not to get older? My father, the rabbi, my mother, the wife, my brother, the peacemaker. I'm Isaac, the knife.
we had a lot of fun making this record, and he's one of my oldest and dearest clients. He's an incredibly creative, talented, poetic word maestro. And we had a ton of fun making that record. And there's rock tunes on it, there's folk tunes on it, there's tunes with loops and atmospherics, and it's a very eclectic, interesting, fun record. It's really fun.
One of the things I love is that you're taking a ukulele.
Yep.
You know, and we know what ukes sound like, baritone,
Exactly.
whatever.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking you've taken me to a completely
It's something
place.
different, yeah.
Yep.
And again, this is another great experiment where you can flip the tuning around and get different ideas. But he actually had the tuning, and he was very adamant that we keep it there. And I was like, okay. And that was the one with the two strings.
Yeah.
So those are unison.
Yeah.
And the fun thing is, there's some interesting things you can have with the two strings.
Yeah. You got those octaves
And
right there.
the other thing is, you can never get them perfectly in tune, so you hit a harmonic, get a little extra shimmer on that top note. It's kind of fun.
A lot of guitarists assume that you've got to have expensive guitars all the time.
Right.
And I
Right.
think you and I are of the same philosophy that the vibe of the guitar matters a heck of a lot more than what you paid for it.
Very much. Very much. Well, and it really depends on what you're looking for. Again, hearkening back to the concept of colors in the palette and how do you distinguish your music in the context of a recording in 2019, that's a real trick. And so often the guitar that sounds unusual and a little different, it's tough to tell what this guy is. It's like it's kind of a ukulele. It sort of could be a nylon string with a capo. It's kind of in the middle. And so that's great. You establish a sound that's a little bit left to center. It's not your normal six string.
Okay, so something occurred to me. You showed me some photos of the new studio. I haven't set foot in it yet.
Totally.
I'm hearing
Yeah, you
it
gotta
only
come
as
visit.
stuff of legend, right?
You gotta come visit.
Someday I will, and I'll bring the camera. Watch out.
Exactly.
What I was curious about, you said you have about 10 guitars on the walls.
Yep.
How is that changing the frequency with which you grab a guitar for a session, or is it mainly decor?
It's a little of both. I mean, to me, and again, I'm a guitar player, so for me it's inspiring to walk into the room and see some not just aesthetically beautiful guitars, but guitars that, you know, I've had in some cases for a very long time, over 2 or 3 decades, and that's inspiring for me. So when you walk into the room, people who have come in, so far people get a different sense, but they get a same level of inspiration of, wow, this is a room for making music.
Yeah.
There are instruments on the walls, there's keyboards all around, there's a bunch of cases on a shelf that have a whole bunch of other guitars.
Yeah.
And they feel inspired, and that's the point.
It's funny because in my old studio, remember on Starlit Drive, I used to have
Oh
guitars
yeah,
up
I
on the
remember.
walls, right?
Yeah.
And there really is a difference. There's something about having
Yep.
them right there where you can grab them. It's
Exactly.
different. I don't know. You know, I guess the older I get, the more I think about barriers. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
Like, what's the barrier? You know, you think about it in terms of a business.
Definitely.
What's the barrier to entry? You know,
Yep.
and
Yep.
getting a new customer. What's the barrier to entry?
Yep.
But there's something about this ease with which you can
Right.
go from thought,
Mm-hmm.
concept to I'm going to do something with that.
Very
and I
much.
have, unfortunately, right now in my current office studio setup, everything's in cases.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
The cases call to me,
Right.
but there's enough resistance sometimes to actually go pull it. Where am I going to set it down? Open it up.
Right.
You know,
Right.
And you can only do one at a time. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, this
exactly.
is the saddest
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
to me is that I don't have about 20 arms, and I can play 3 at least or 4 of these at the
Totally.
same time. You know,
I'm with you. I'm with you.
yeah, but I like that concept a lot. And when I saw the photos of your new place, I
Oh,
thought,
yeah.
I'm so glad.
It's a
And
lot
you
of
told me
fun.
it was a pain in the butt to hang them.
It took a minute. It took a minute, yeah, because the
Worth
walls are angled and, you know, whatever. It was a whole.
Sure.
That was a whole saga. That's a whole other discussion. Carpentry, rebel carpentry.
Yeah.
How to get
Yeah,
these
yeah.
things hanging right.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's something very inspiring. I mean, it's a little tricky in the studio because you try and move fast, but when you're trying to catch a part, you know, if it's an electric into an amp, maybe with some pedals, and there's a mic and a preamp and maybe a compressor. And so it's never as spontaneous as you want it to be.
Yes.
Because you have to get the sound right. Mm-hmm. And there's a fine line between, you know, taking 2 hours to get a crazy, beautiful sound and taking 15 minutes and catching the inspiration. And the new room is bigger. It's not necessarily liver. It's a little more live, but it's a lot more spacious than the old room. So I'm trying to throw up room mics as often as I can to catch that distance and catch some depth. And even if I only bring it in 10-15% in the mix, that makes a huge difference in the depth of the recording. That's the toughest thing to get in a recording is depth. The hardest thing.
The "you are there" effect. Yeah,
Exactly.
I know.
Yep.
Come in the room with me and hear
Yep.
what this feels like.
Yep.
There's something very interesting especially when I go back to certain records. I think a lot of times in the 80s there was a little bit of an antiseptic feeling.
Oh, definitely.
You know? It's like
Yep.
the room disappeared. Where
Yep.
are we? I don't
That's
know where
right.
we are. And there
Yep.
are, you know, obviously exceptions to that in the 80s.
Yeah.
Daniel Lanois being
Daniel
one, you know,
Lanois.
he was all about
Yep.
that.
Yep.
But you know, I think if I have a complaint about certain styles of music or eras of music, it will come down to I don't feel like I'm there. I feel
Right.
like they are
Right.
separate from me. They created this in this certain box.
Oh,
And
gosh. And that is really the trick, you know. Different kinds of records draw you in different ways. And it's funny because there's one of my favorite producers is favorite for this reason that you're talking about. He's a bit of a nutty nut, but he's made some classic pop records. And of course, I'm having a senior moment, blanking on his name. But he's one of the guys who gets that clean, in-your-face, super dry, super slick, but not too bright sound. He produced the first Seal record. You'll probably think of him before I can.
hold on, yes.
And he's brilliant at that sound, right? And generally, I'm not...
Trevor
Horn.
Trevor Horn,
You're
thank
right.
you.
You're
Okay.
right.
Okay.
Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So he's the Buggles. Video Killed the Radio Star,
Yeah,
right? That was his
yeah.
band. So he's a pop guy. He's a serious pop guy. But somehow, and his engineer is a mad genius. His engineer is a lot of the key to the sound, but somehow he makes that kind of flat, kind of shiny sound, but he makes it work. And it still has depth. It's like the stuff that wants to be shiny is shiny, but then the stuff that wants to be big and thunderous is still big and thunderous, right? He's very good at giving you a very full spectrum thing. The flip side of that is someone like T-Bone Burnett, who did the record we talked about earlier, Raising Sand.
Yep.
So T-Bone Burnett is a big fan of the acoustic environment, the room, old ribbon mics, distance miking, and he's also a nut about surfaces. When he records, he doesn't want any he doesn't want any cases in the room, but particularly if they're cases past the 80s when they started doing the molded plastic cases, because you're going to have that sound somewhere bouncing around the room and it's going to hit a mic.
Yeah.
And it's not the sound he's after.
Yeah.
Right? It's really interesting. So that's one reason how he gets that depth. And plus his engineer, Mike Persante, is a mad genius. Absolute mad genius.
Love it. Love it. So I'm trying to think of how I want to wrap this up.
Because we could go on.
Well, you know what? I'm having a little too much fun. You know, I'm kind of like.
And these are only 3 instruments. There's more instruments. I didn't bring the strange Turkish oud banjo jumbush instrument. I should have brought that because that's a doozy.
You don't know this.
We'll
There's
catch
an
that the
oud
next
solo
one.
on my new EP.
Oh,
so you'll appreciate that.
fantastic. Oh, fantastic.
So something I guess where I do want to leave this then is I try to make sure that every time I do something with Guitar Discoveries that what I'm trying to do is help people who maybe at any stage of learning the guitar somehow come to both a greater appreciation of it and just a little more inspiration, right? Just something that kind of jacks them up. And so what I get from this, because I was asking myself, since you brought 3 funky faves, what am I getting from this as a guitarist? How is this inspiring me? And I thought to myself, first of all, I thought, I got a uke, I'm going to retune it.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So that's one thing that I'm getting out of this.
Yep.
Another thing is, okay, I don't have a bouzouki.
Right.
However, I've got some stuff that kind of sounds like that,
Sure.
and I really dig that.
Sure.
I've got a mandolin. I might try taking my mandolin and tuning it down and making the strings flap a little bit, right?
That's
Dadgad the thing.
Yep,
because
mandolin.
Mandolin in fifths just feels weird to me. It's
me
too
too.
small.
As a guitar player, it does not make sense.
I just
chord
can't get
shapes.
there.
Yep, I'm the same. Yeah,
okay, good. You're with me.
Yep, I'm totally with you.
So
in fact, I've got an old mandolin at the studio that's an old K from the 40s. It sounds wonderful. And it's in Dadgad.
Perfect.
At least, Dadga.
Yeah, exactly.
To be
Dadga.
accurate, Dadga.
And then what did I get from the dobro? I think the answer for me on that one is, well, for one thing, I just love anything with a slide.
Yeah,
right?
that's a lot of
But the
fun.
other thing is, people don't need to own a dobro
Right.
to try slide.
Sure.
Right? In fact,
Right.
it's the
Yep.
perfect use for that old crappy acoustic that you have
Yes,
that
that's
has bad action.
the bad
You've never
action.
had it set up because it was
Exactly.
too cheap.
Yep.
So it's sitting there,
Yep.
and the strings are a third of an inch off the frets. You go, what am I
Yep.
going to do with this thing?
Yeah,
Hey, guess what?
Grab a slide.
Grab a slide.
Make it an open tuning and grab a slide. Yeah,
Because
it's a lot of fun.
one of the beauties of that too, and I think most people don't realize this, is that it doesn't matter what the action is when you're playing with a slide. But the other thing about that is you can always play in tune.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
It's like as long as it's in tune when you play with a slide,
Exactly.
you will
You're
be in
good.
tune. So you're
Yep.
good. So
The thing I would add to everything you're saying in terms of, the journey on any instrument, the journey in guitar, in the 80s at Berklee School of Music, there was a lot of fusion going on, so we had Mahavishnu Orchestra, Return to Forever, Al Di Meola, Miles Davis, Bitches Brew, Jeff Beck, Blow by Blow, all these fusion records we were
Yes.
listening to and trying to get all these sounds and get our technicals figured out.
yeah.
And at a certain point, at least some people stay there and they pursue that technicality that's dazzling to me on a technical level. But if you look at the arc of certain players, and the one who comes to mind in my mind is Miles Davis, who has a really interesting career trajectory. He starts his life as a jazz player in Kansas City, and then he comes to New York and he's playing with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, right? And you hear Miles in the early 50s, and he's a burning bebop player.
Yes.
I mean, he is flying, and
Yep.
it's like, okay, whoa, this kid's incredible.
Yeah.
And then 9, 10, 11 years, I don't know the exact year, but then you hear ba ba ba, kind of blue, ba da 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 da, space,
Simplicity.
ba da 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 da.
These amazing players,
Yep.
the ones who are just absolute virtuosos who can knock your socks
Yep.
off. 99% of the population is going to go, their hair is going to get blown back,
Yep.
but they won't remember anything of it,
Well,
right? Other
and
than
that's the
that guy
thing.
blew me away.
Yep, right.
But
And-
then you got a guy like John Mayer or
Yep.
Mark Knopfler is a perfect example,
Yep.
right? Where
Yep.
the tastiest things are often where he finds some sinuous line that he wraps around a song, and
Yep.
he comes back to it 3 or 4 times, maybe
Yep.
with a little variation.
Yep.
You keep looking forward to that. When's he going to come back to that
Yeah,
little
yeah,
tasty
yeah,
moment?
totally.
Ooh,
Yep.
what's he going to do to it this time?
Yeah.
Those are the things I think that start making the music universal.
Yeah,
They're the
I
things
agree.
that people.
It's
if
the
someone
simple
said, "Hey,
stuff.
how do you sing this?" or "How
Yeah.
does this song go?" If
Exactly.
someone said, "How does my girl go?" chances are they're going to start bong bong dong bong dong bong
That's
bong.
right.
Right? They're not going to
That's
say, "I
right.
got sunshine." They're going to do the guitar lick.
Well, and depending, and this is the fun thing about working on records and pop music, is you want little sprinkles of melodies that are memorable. I like to say when we're working on a record, if we're adding something, does it help 2 things? Does it help us tap our foot? And does it help us sing along?
Cool.
Right? Those two things. That's kind of all we're after. And, you know, we're making folk records, pop records, rock and roll records, jazz records. But I'll argue this goes back to, 300 years, in the classical world. Beethoven. Ba 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 ba.
Yeah. Who's got the best hook?
That's one of the best. That's one of the best hooks of all time.
You got it.
Ba 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 ba. And then where's he gonna go now? Ba 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 ba.
Yeah.
Right. And he kind of expands it. He folds it. He reverses it. He inverts it. He was just writing hooks too. I mean, admittedly, he's a little long-winded. I don't think he'd get on the radio today.
Yes.
There's a process where you reach a certain point and then you want to kind of refine what you do. I'll never forget Greg Lease, the pedal steel from Raising Sand, who was in on a record I was doing about 13, 14 years ago. I remember we got to take 3 on this song, and every take was spectacular. Absolutely spectacular.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, Greg, all these takes are so great, I'm going to end up comping them. Can you kind of give me an idea of, how you would suggest that I comp your playing, because it's all so gorgeous.
Right.
And he said, I really liked this melody in the bridge from take 2 that I remember. And I really liked a counter line I did in the second verse from take 1. And I really liked the outro take 3. And he says, all the other stuff you can fill in, but those were the moments that I remember. And he went by melody and counter melody. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind as a player, is what's your melody, what's your counter melody, are you accompanying a singer, are you playing on a record, are you doing an instrumental record, and always keeping those 2 melodic threads in your mind as an artist, whatever the format is. That's a good thing to recognize, and that doesn't necessarily need technical virtuosity, right? Just about
Amen.
melodies,
Amen.
That'd be my parting thought.
Thank you, Andrew Bush. I
Robert,
truly appreciate
what
this,
a pleasure,
buddy.
man.
It's awesome.
Thanks for doing this.
Yes, my
A lot
first
of
guest
fun.
on Guitar Discoveries.
Oh, my
Loved
goodness.
having you, man.
Wow. Well, hopefully we'll do it again.
Absolutely. I'm
Really
coming
fun.
down to Grandma's.
Yeah, you got to come.
I'll be there. So there you have it, part 3 of Funky Favorites and Studio Stories. Hope you loved what you saw and heard. Please leave a comment. Always appreciate that. If you want to see more of this series and a lot of the other videos that I've put up on the channel, please go to guitardiscoveries.com. That is a complete list of all the videos I've done. It also has links to my music, and I always appreciate you going and checking that out as well. My band Cosmic Spin is also accessible through that website, so I hope you'll check out what I've been working on. Please also subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to me, and I love to be able to share more videos with you and for you to know that they're happening when new ones come out. So please subscribe. See you soon.